Yes, indeed, folks. You listen to Blue Please here on cynicalbrit.com with myself, Tolbis. You can get your emails in for the illusion of choice to the Moloch at cynicalbrit.com. That is the Moloch at cynicalbrit.com. Okay. I found this article a few weeks ago on Gama Sutra, and I think that it rings quite nicely into WoW, and I think perhaps it might be a good idea that we try and apply this rule to World of Warcraft and see if it actually fits. So, let's start, shall we? I'm going to link this for you in the chat room, and I'm also going to put it in the show notes for those of you listening on the podcast. There we go. Right, so this is one of the Gama Sutra article, and it is a quote. It's part of an interview with the developers of a game by the name of Puzzle Quest 2. Those of you who know Puzzle Quest will be aware that Puzzle Quest involves time vampirism, specifically. If you would like to lose an awful lot of time, then I can guarantee the Puzzle Quest will allow you to do just that. It will suck away your life. Seriously, I bought Puzzle Quest, and then suddenly, after about 3 months, I woke up again and wondered what the hell's going on here? Oh, look! Oh god, it's July. I'm pretty sure I bought this back in April. Oh, dear lord, it was some hefty stuff, ladies and gentlemen, that I can guarantee. Okay, so Puzzle Quest 2. This interview has an interesting quote specifically, and it's indeed the headline of this particular article, which is complexity makes Puzzle Quest 2 easier to balance. Okay. So, it's a big feature-length interview, but there's a very nice quote here that says, "We've added a third channel of dealing damage in Puzzle Quest 2, which makes the action points and weapons, which is the action points and weapon system. We feel that it makes us easier to balance the actual game because this system is in effect." Now, Faulkner says it's quite a complex system, and there are 33 different types of weapons in the game, each with slightly different stats and different abilities, blah, blah, blah. Now, he goes on to say that despite this, they are aware of the fact that Puzzle Quest has a big crossover appeal. We do a lot of usability testing. We really need to know what hardcore people think and what casual people think. So a lot of people testing all the time. We're constantly streaming people into the studio to have a look at the game, and we have the design team sitting around and watching them play, and watching the facial expressions, because the face never lies. So it's a constant process, and it is very important. It's a big, long interview. It's well worth having a look at, but those are the two quotes that I really care about. I think they're rather important in this regard. So, let's talk about it, shall we? It's a good set of quotes, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One of those reasons, of course, is the fact that WoW has crossover appeal. So any other game that has been successful that has crossover appeal should be analysed. And the reason it should be analysed is because it's a very nascent genre. There are a lot of games that have tried to have crossover appeal and failed miserably. In terms of MMOs, that consists of one. WoW has the crossover appeal. It has the biggest share of the crossover market by a massive margin. You have games that do, by all means, massively multiplayer games that actually do appeal to casuals. Farmville, I suppose, counts. Habbo Hotel counts. That appeals to a fantastic crossover, i.e., casual players and betards. But most importantly, you've got games, say, like Free Realms, that appeal to just casual people, but they don't get hardcore people in there. WoW, on the other hand, seems to appeal to both, somehow. So, not only is it important to analyse why that is, but any other game that pulls that off, because it is such a rare accomplishment, should also be analysed to try and find what that secret ingredient is. Like, what makes it so delicious? One has to ask. Well, one has to ask. So let's ask, shall we? What makes it so delicious? Let's have a look at Puzzle Quest. I can give you some very in-depth reasons as to why Puzzle Quest is very appealing to both casual and hardcore players. Now, the reason I can do this is because a few years ago now, I actually purchased this game for my mother. I sent her this. I actually created her a Steam account at one point and said, "Hey, here's a Steam account. It was a birthday. I got her some other stuff, and I also sent her a card. And this card had username and password for a Steam account in it. I'd set it all up, and I put a bunch of stuff on it. So I put stuff like Peggle on it, and I put Plants vs. Zombies on it later on, and I put stuff like Luxor on it, and Bookworm Adventures on it, and I put Puzzle Quest on it. And you know what she played more than anything else? Puzzle Quest. Her character is about 5 times as powerful as mine! It's ridiculous. It's something like level 95. It's got god-tier weaponry. It's like, I've never seen anything like it. Even my wife didn't grind Puzzle Quest that much. And, oh dear lord, that is really impressive when you think about it. So, why? How did she do that? Well, it's very easy. Because Puzzle Quest is as complex as you want it to be. That's the big deal about it. Puzzle Quest has a massive number of different systems built within it, all of which are totally and completely optional. You can beat the game simply by grinding at easy stuff. You can do it. However, there are multiple layers of complexity within that you can choose to use. That's the important thing. You can choose to use those layers of complexity. So what are the things we got? Well, let's have a think. So Puzzle Quest, what's it got? Well, it's got weapon crafting. It's got weapon customization. It's got mount training. It's got spell learning. It's got siege warfare. All of those things. They're all in the game, and they're completely optional. And that actually adds a large degree of complexity to an otherwise very simple battle system. The battle system, if you don't know about Puzzle Quest, it's bejeweled, yeah? It's bejeweled with magic. It's bejeweled with dragons and magic missile, which you can cast. Indeed, it's bejeweled whereby you wear a robe and wizard hat, should you be into that sort of thing, and I'm not judging you if you are. However, it's still, after all of that, bejeweled. What is WoW? WoW is a generic MMO. After all of the raids, and all of the PvP, and all of the multiple... Now, there aren't multiple ways of advancement, what am I talking about? That's ridiculous. After the hero classes, after the multiple increases in level, after the extra complexity added in over the course of 6 years, it is still, at its very core, a simplistic hotkey-based RPG, which involves push-button, thing dies. You don't have to aim, you don't have to worry about positioning, you press magic missile, and the gazebo is dead. It's as simple as that. That is how WoW works, and it's very core, and you can be successful to a degree. To a degree. And you know what? There are a lot of people that are successful to that degree who are entirely happy. They're okay with it. They love the game in its current form. And more power to them. I wish I could. I wish I could adore the game in the way that I used to, but I can't. Now, the point that's being made in this article is that multiple layers of complexity are a good thing. And what they can also allow you to do is properly balance a game. How will that work in WoW? Well, here's a direct example, because some people are saying, well, Total Biscuit, it's Puzzle Quest. It's not the same thing. You can't possibly apply that. Of course I can. My name's Total Biscuit. I can do whatever the hell I please. But in the meantime, allow me to say this. Why exactly do you think that there is only one optimal method of doing things? Because the system is too simple. That is why. Because you can mathematically prove everything in this game, it is too simple. And there is only one optimal way of doing things. And that's a bad thing. Surely variety is what we want to encourage here. How do you do it? Add more levels of complexity. And by doing so, you make it more difficult to theorycraft. What you also do is you close the divide. So let's have a look at two talent specs, for instance. Frost and Arcane. Arcane, optimal raiding spec. Frost, not. Simple as that. If you raid Frost, you're dumb. Simply dumb. You are. You're stupid. Sorry. You raid Frost? You are raiding suboptimally. You are bringing absolutely nothing to the raid of any description. You suck. However, what if there were a system that were brought into the game? Let's call it... let's have a think, shall we? Road of the Giants. Yes, indeed. Let's call it Road of the Giants. And this was a system designed for level 85 players. And what it would do is it would allow you an alternate method of progressing your character in different directions. And it would allow you to acquire multiple upgrades that were not based on talents, levels, and gear. Okay, so we've added an additional layer of complexity there. So, Road of the Giants would add this layer in, and at that point, the game would become more difficult to theorycraft. because you've added in that additional variable. How about we put in some more, and some more, and some more? And then, of course, you are turning around and saying, but Total Biscuit, this is absurd. People will never understand it. Sure they will. They won't necessarily do it right, but they'll get it. They'll get it on a very basic level. People get talents on a basic level and they screw them up all the damn time. They're still capable of doing the content they want to do. Sure, they're restricted on certain things, like, for instance, a Frost Mage isn't going to get all that many raid invites. However, it's not going to stop him from raiding per se with Pug. It's not going to stop him from doing 5-mans. It's certainly not going to stop him from doing PvP. Indeed, you've got the opposite problem there. So, when you've got so many people enjoying a game like Puzzle Quest at a basic level, and yet are still able to do the content that they enjoy, they're not able to min-max, they're not able to get the best sets of customizable gear, because either they don't understand the system or they simply don't want to get involved in it. They don't have the best mounts, they don't have the best castles, they don't have the best spells, but it doesn't matter because they could still enjoy the game for what it is. They like the match 3 mechanics, they like fighting monsters, they like casting magic missile in their robe and wizard's hat. They don't worry about the complexity of it because they're actually having fun. Now, you know what the removal of Path to the Titans says to me? It shows a lack of confidence, not just in their own development, but in the game itself. That the game is not actually enjoyable enough unless you play it on a min-max level. Which is funny, because I'm fairly sure in the past they have said exactly the opposite. You don't have to min-max to enjoy this game. Okay, so when you turn around and tell me, oh, well, all guilds were just used the same because they were all min-max. And yet, how long ago was it that you said, well, loads of people don't min-max, they still do really well in this game, and we don't want to necessarily encourage min-maxing, but it's okay that we have it in there anyway. So that applies to your old stuff, right? That applies to the additional layers of complexity of guild talents and Path to the Titans, right? Apparently not. Apparently not. It's really weird, isn't it? Do you think that everyone would get to Path of the Titans absolutely right when it came in? No. Because people don't even get their talent trees right, for God's sake. You've seen people specting weird stuff. They don't even get their gear right. They don't even roll on the right gear. But it's okay. It is actually okay. I'll mock them on the show. That's fine, they're fodder for that. But they can still play. They don't have to listen to my show. They don't even have to be aware that I exist. They don't have to post on the MMO Champion forum saying Total Biscuit is a big meanie, which indeed is what I found 3 days ago. Yes, someone was ranting against the whole, oh, you being good is, bad, nerds, but Total Biscuit is a big meanie. Wow, that was actually on the MMO Champion forums. I'm pretty sure several people agreed with him. I was disappointed. I expected way more people to agree with the fact that I'm a big meanie. But there you go. You can't necessarily predict what the player base is going to say. It doesn't matter. It's okay if they screw up because the game allows them to do that. However, you add in those additional layers of complexities. Not only do you give more options, but yes, you make it much harder to theory craft the right answer. You keep layering layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of complexity into the game, and you allow players to go in specific directions. You allow them to pick the direction they want to go in, you allow them to customize, you allow them to grow their character beyond that, and isn't it okay? Because why are we so suddenly concerned about this? That, oh no, complexity's a bad thing. Oh, complexity. Well, here's the thing. Complexity is surely part of the learning experience of an MMO, right? We have expected for the last 6 years that players have to learn a new form of play, i.e. raiding, if they want to get the best out of the game. Or they've got to learn PvP, which pre-max level they would not be so good at. No, max level PvP is a whole different ballgame. Max level raiding, the only kind of raiding, is a whole different ballgame to a 5-man. We have expected players to learn that complexity. We have expected players to learn the complexity of more abilities, more talents, and more complex gear with more stats on it. Epic gear has more stats on it, and more different types of stats on it, than blue gear, than green gear, than white gear, than grey gear, needless to say. And we have expected up until this point that everybody can deal with that on a certain level. Enough to play. They don't have to be pro at it, because the game has never really required them to be so. Now, on the subject of balance, I like to give you just a brief example here. On the stream, I have in my hand a small clock, and in the other hand, a horrible smelling deodorant called Lynx Fever. Now, if I put these behind my back, and I muck them around a bit, and I say, okay, Which hand is the Lynx fever in? Well, you've got two choices, don't you? You've got left or right. And, of course, I'll tell you neither because I'm a cheater and I dropped it behind my chair. However, let's say I was Dr. Octopus. This is a terrible analogy, by the way. I'm just going to make this absolutely clear. And I had 4 arms and I had 4 different things. Then suddenly, it wouldn't be a 50% chance, would it? It would be a 25. When you add more and more and more elements into an equation, it becomes more difficult to balance. In terms of, oh no, we might not get the numbers right. However, it becomes much easier if you have more numbers to work with to get it closer and to have a greater variety. So, if you've got a really small equation, you could say, oh, well, I've got these things I can work with, I can get maybe 2 or 3 possible answers out of this, and there's going to be a massive disparity between those answers. But if you've got an equation with loads of different variables that you can swap in, swap out, then you get much closer. Perfect balance is an illusion, and it never happens. Get that into your heads right now. Primarily, this is a PvE game. There are some PvP elements in it, but the more variety you put in and the more complexity and the more stuff you layer one on top of the other, the closer you can actually get, because you get these wider variety of variables. So you don't get this massive disparity between good spec, bad spec. You get good spec, not quite as good spec, maybe not quite as good spec, but still pretty good in certain situations spec, and blah, blah, blah. That's what you get from adding complexity to the game, and you are not necessarily expected to understand all of it perfectly. You don't have to, because there's a lot of content in this game that is not aimed at min-maxing. For God's sake, every raid! You don't have to min-max for any of this stuff now. If Blizzard is really going to go down this route of saying, we want content to be open to everyone, then this is the perfect time to exploit the fact that your raids are too damn easy. Add the complexity into the game, because if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. As we've seen by the guy standing in the fire in ICC. You get it wrong, it doesn't matter. It's as simple as that. Or indeed, as complex as that. Just think about that. The guys behind Puzzle Quest 2 say that complexity aids balance. Maybe you might want to listen to them. My name is Total Biscuit, you're listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. So many people ask me for Sabaton. You know what, I'm going to give them Sabaton. I'm going to give them the one track that I adore above all else in terms of Sabaton. I have no need to announce it, it is the first few lyrics of this track, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Enjoy.